Before we start, I need to ask, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I love seeing how far our little stories reach. And if you've ever had a night you wish you could undo, or one that unexpectedly changed everything, then this one might just hit close to home. So let me take you back to the night that started it all. It had been one of those soul-grinding days. You know, the kind where the air feels heavy, the clock moves like syrup, and even your coworkers seem like ghosts drifting through motions. I put in 13 hours at the firm that day, juggling back-to-back meetings, endless emails, and a team that couldn't function without tapping on my shoulder every 10 minutes. Being 55 and still the go-to person in a male-dominated office had its charm 10 years ago. Now it just drained me. I came home that night later than usual. The house was quiet, blessedly so, and I dropped my heels by the front door like they weighed 100 pounds each. The soft glow from the kitchen light spilled into the living room, and I made a beeline for the wine rack before even taking off my coat. 3 glasses later, maybe 4, I'd slid down onto the living room carpet, back against the couch, a jazz record spinning on the turntable. The soft sound of Miles Davis filled the space around me like smoke, and for the first time all week, I could finally breathe. I felt the wine humming in my blood, numbing the tightness in my chest, softening the weight on my shoulders. That's when I heard the front door open. I froze. Not in fear exactly, but in embarrassment. I wasn't expecting anyone, and certainly not Lucas. Lucas, my son, 28 years old, tall like his father, kind but with that deep knowing look that sees more than you want him to. He'd been staying with me for the last 2 months while his apartment building was undergoing renovations. It was supposed to be temporary, a few weeks at most. But honestly, I hadn't minded. It had been years since I'd had someone in the house besides myself. The silence had grown a little too loud since my divorce. He stepped in, paused, and then said gently, "Mom." I looked up from my spot on the carpet, flushed and blinking slowly. "Hey, sweetheart," I mumbled, swirling the wine in my glass like it was the most natural thing in the world. Long day, unjust, decompressing. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, tilted his head like he was trying to read between my words. Then, without judgment or a single hint of condescension, he walked over and sat on the floor beside me. "You okay?" he asked softly. That question hit harder than it should have. I could have lied. Could have told him I was fine, waved it off, turned it into a joke. But something about the way he said it, so calm, so genuine, made my throat tighten. "No," I whispered. "Not really." We sat there for a while, the record still spinning, the wine catching the soft light like rubies in my glass. I told him everything. I didn't mean to. Not all at once, but it came out in pieces. How exhausted I was. How lonely the house felt once the lights went out. How being a strong woman at work sometimes meant having no strength left at home. How I'd been holding everything together so tightly that I didn't know how to let go. Lucas didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. Really listened. That alone was enough to make me cry. I turned to look at him and realized how much he'd grown. Not just taller, not just older, but deeper, somehow more present. He wasn't just my son sitting next to me. In that moment, he felt like someone who truly saw me. "I didn't mean for you to see me like this," I said, wiping at the corner of my eye with the back of my hand, tipsy and falling apart. He gave me the smallest, kindest smile. Maybe it's okay to fall apart sometimes. And I don't know what it was, the wine, the music, or the soft light in his eyes. But I leaned my head on his shoulder, and for the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to feel held. Not physically, not quite yet, but emotionally completely. "You're always taking care of everyone else," he said. "Maybe it's time someone took care of you." That single sentence unraveled something in me. I don't know how long we sat there. Mother and son, 2 souls tired of pretending they were fine. The world outside didn't matter. Not the ticking clock. Not tomorrow's emails. Not the expectation to be strong, composed, perfect. It was just us. And something had shifted. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything taboo or twisted. But it was intimate, deeply so. A moment where 2 people let down their guard. And in doing so, found something beautiful in the space in between. Eventually, he helped me up. Not with awkwardness or judgment, but with quiet care. "You should get some sleep, Mom," he said as he steadied me on my feet. I nodded, brushing past him. the warmth of his hand lingering longer than it should have. And as I made my way down the hallway to my bedroom, my mind buzzed, not from the wine anymore, but from the unspoken questions swirling in my chest, about who we were, about what we just shared, about whether that space between us had changed forever. But I didn't have the answers. Not yet. Only the feeling that something was beginning and that it was going to change everything. The morning after was quiet. I woke to the faint sound of birds outside and the soft hum of the dishwasher running. For a moment I lay still, trying to remember if last night was a dream, or if I had actually spilled my soul to my son while half drunk on a living room floor. It wasn't a dream. The fog in my mind lifted slowly, and with it came a wave of embarrassment. Not because of the wine. I was old enough to laugh off a tipsy evening, but because I've let him see so much of me, the tired version, the vulnerable one, the woman behind the title, behind the polished hair and pressed blouses. I threw on a robe and made my way to the kitchen. The smell of coffee hit me before I even turned the corner. Lucas stood there barefoot in joggers and a t-shirt, pouring 2 mugs like he did this every morning. He looked up and smiled, calm, natural. No sign of awkwardness or discomfort, just warmth. "Morning," he said, sliding 1 mug across the counter toward me. I stood there for a beat, surprised by how easily he moved through the space. Like this was his home too. Now maybe it had been in a way long before his apartment flooded. "Thanks," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic like it might anchor me. He took a sip of his own, then leaned back against the counter watching me. I couldn't meet his eyes right away. My mind was still playing last night on repeat. "I guess I said too much," I muttered, half laughing, half grinning. "You didn't," he said. "You said exactly what you needed to say." That made me glance up. There wasn't a trace of judgment in his face, only understanding. And that somehow made it worse. I felt stripped down, like he could see straight through the version of myself I wore like armor. "I'm not used to being the one who breaks," I admitted. "You're not broken, Mom. You're just tired." That's different. The way he said Mom didn't sound like a title anymore. It sounded more like a name, a placeholder for something deeper. And I wasn't sure what to do with that. We talked a little more about work, about how he was still waiting to hear from his building manager. We danced around the previous night like it hadn't cracked something open, but it had. That afternoon I came home early. I needed time to think, to breathe, to just sit in the silence before he came back from the gym or wherever he'd gone. I walked barefoot across the hardwood, poured myself water this time, and stared out the window at the backyard. It was silly, maybe, how much I liked having him around. Silly how safe I felt just knowing someone else was in the house. And it wasn't just about company. It was him. The way he listened, the way he understood things without needing them spelled out, the way he looked at me like I was still someone worth knowing, even in my least glamorous moments. And then around 6 p.m. I heard the front door. He walked in, sweat dampening the collar of his shirt, gym bag slung over one shoulder. "You're home early," he said with a hint of surprise. "Yeah," I replied. Thriving didn't feel like staying late. He nodded and dropped the bag in the hallway. I watched him for a moment. The way he moved with casual ease, so familiar yet different. "Grown. Dinner?" he asked. I blinked. "You're cooking." He grinned. "I figured I owed you one after last night." I laughed. "Oh, so wine confessions come with a side of pasta now." He chuckled, walking toward the kitchen. "Exactly. Drunken wisdom and garlic bread. Perfect pairing." I sat at the island while he cooked. It wasn't fancy. Just pan, some sautéed veggies, and store-bought sauce. But it was the most cared for I'd felt in months, maybe years. And not because of the food, but because he thought to do it, because he knew I needed it even without asking. We talked through dinner, real conversation, not just small talk about life, about loneliness, about how strange it is when you reach a certain age and realize that the version of yourself you've been performing all your life doesn't quite fit anymore. At one point, I looked up and found him watching me. Not in a way that made me self-conscious, but in a way that made me feel seen. "You've changed," I said softly. "So have you," he replied. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It felt full, heavy with things neither of us were quite ready to say. We were towing the edge of something, not inappropriate, not wrong, just deeply human, emotional, raw. Later we moved to the living room. This time I sat on the couch and he joined me close enough that our arms brushed when we reached for our drinks. "I used to think I had to be strong all the time," I said quietly. "You don't," he said. Not with me. My breath caught at that. And for the second night in a row I felt my chest tighten. Not from stress this time, but from something warm and strange curling inside me. Do you ever feel like you've missed out on parts of yourself? I asked. He turned toward me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. All the time, he said. And just like that, it was there again. That connection, that subtle but undeniable shift in the air between us. Not romantic, not forbidden, but deeper than anything I'd expected. Something I didn't yet know how to name. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I stood in the hallway for a long while, staring at the closed door to the guest room. To his room for now. My hand hovered near the doorknob for a moment, then dropped. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I couldn't deny it anymore. Something had changed between us, and I wasn't sure if we were crossing a line or simply discovering a new kind of truth. I didn't sleep much that night. Even with my bedroom door shut, the house felt like it was breathing with me, slow, quiet, a little unsure of itself. I lay on top of the covers, arms folded beneath my head, staring at the ceiling while my thoughts traced slow circles in the dark. The truth was, I didn't recognize the woman I'd become lately. Not the overworked manager, not the silent empty nester, not the version of me who poured wine alone just to take the edge off, and not even the woman sitting across the dinner table from her son, suddenly unsure of where the lines of comfort and connection began or ended. Lucas had grown up, sure. But it wasn't just that. He understood me now in a way no one else did. Not my ex-husband, not my coworkers, not even my friends who'd known me since college. It was like something about us had realigned when we weren't looking. I woke around 6 a.m., still in my robe, still exhausted. I stepped out of the room quietly, half expecting Lucas to still be asleep, but the guest room door was already cracked open. I followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen where he was standing shirtless rinsing a dish under the faucet. He looked up and gave me a sleepy smile. Didn't think he'd be up this early, he said. I couldn't sleep, I replied. You? He shrugged. Same. The quiet stretched for a moment before I joined him at the counter, reaching for the second mug he'd already set out for me. I noticed that again, how he anticipated things, how he saw needs before they were spoken. We stood side by side, sipping in silence. There was something unspoken in the air, like we were both waiting for the other to say the first real thing, the true thing. Finally, I set my mug down and asked, do you ever wonder how different life might have been if we had more time like this when you were younger? He glanced at me, that thoughtful look returning to his face. Yeah, I do, he said. A lot, actually. It hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so many years working, juggling everything alone after the divorce, trying to keep food on the table and tuition paid and lights on. And maybe in the midst of all that surviving, I'd missed the small, quiet chances to know my son, not just as a boy, but as the man he'd become. I think about it too, I whispered. What I might have missed. You didn't miss as much as you think, he replied gently. But I did. I missed you. I swallowed hard. That afternoon we decided to take a walk. It had been weeks since I'd had the energy for anything outside of work and home. But the weather was perfect. Late spring sun, trees alive with green and just the right kind of breeze. We ended up on the path behind the neighborhood park, the one he used to run along when he was 16. We walked side by side, not touching but somehow closer than ever. I always thought you were unshakable, he said after a long stretch of silence. I thought I had to be, I replied. But you don't. Not now. Not with me. I looked over at him then, really looked. His face wasn't just older. It was open, honest, and I realized in that moment that it wasn't just about age or maturity. Lucas had become someone who held space for others, for me. That night after dinner we ended up on the couch again. No wine this time. Just conversation and something thicker than silence sitting between us. Can I ask you something? He said suddenly, his voice low. Of course, I replied, turning to face him. When you said last night that you felt like you'd lost pieces of yourself, what did you mean exactly? I exhaled slowly, surprised he remembered. I think somewhere along the line I stopped being a woman, I said softly. I became a role, a provider, a boss, a mother, but not me. He nodded slowly. And do you think? He said, hesitating just a moment. You can find her again. I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time in years I felt something stir deep inside me. Not romance, not fantasy, Something older than that, a recognition maybe, I said. But not alone. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a confession. And then, with a gentleness that took my breath away, he reached over and took my hand. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't crossing a line. It was steady, reassuring, honest. His thumb brushed lightly over mine and I didn't pull away. The moment stretched like time had slowed down just enough to notice it. My hand in his, the closeness, the stillness, the emotion blooming quietly behind our eyes. "I'm not trying to make anything weird," he said softly. I want you to know you're not invisible. You're not alone. I see you." And I knew then deep in my chest that I'd been waiting years to hear those words. I felt something break open gently, quietly. A wall I'd built piece by piece without even noticing. And it didn't fall all at once, but it started to crack. Later that night, as I sat in bed alone, staring out the window at the moonlight filtering through the blinds, I touched the back of my hand where his thumb had rested. It was just a moment, just a gesture. But it had shifted something real. And I didn't know what was coming next, only that the way I saw myself, and the way he saw me, had already begun to change. The next few days passed in a strange kind of rhythm. Not awkward, not tense, but quiet, like we were both aware that something had shifted, and neither of us quite knew what to do with it yet. Lucas still made the morning coffee. I still left for work, heels clicking down the front steps. We shared meals. We talked. We laughed. But underneath it all was a gentle hum. A thread pulling a little tighter with every passing day. One night midweek we found ourselves on the back porch. The sky was soft with dusk, the air just cool enough to make the wind brush feel like a whisper across my skin. I had a light blanket over my lap, and Lucas had brought out 2 glasses of tea, setting one beside me without a word. It felt natural now, the closeness. I watched him lean back in the chair beside me, head tilted toward the stars, eyes half lost in thought. The porch light cast a golden halo around him, softening the lines of his face, catching in his hair. "You know," I said, finally breaking the silence, "I've spent so much of my life being afraid to be seen." He turned to me, eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Seen how?" "As just me, as Olivia, not mom, not boss, not the woman who always holds everything together." His gaze didn't waver. "Well, I see you." The simplicity of the words took the air from my lungs. I set my tea aside, folding the blanket tighter around my legs. "Do you ever wonder what life would look like if we didn't live by the roles we were handed?" I asked quietly. "All the time," he said. We sat with that. A kind of understanding settled between us that didn't need to be spoken anymore. It wasn't about crossing lines or chasing something forbidden. It was about the emotional closeness, the safety we'd created, the vulnerability we'd allowed. And yes, it had depth. It had complexity, but more than anything, it had respect. Lucas reached over and lightly touched my hand again like he had before. And this time I turned mine over, letting our palms press together. No rush, no pressure, just contact. That night he didn't go to the guest room. We didn't speak about it. We didn't even look at each other for a moment. Just sat there listening to the night sounds, our hands still lightly joined. Eventually we both stood and I walked back into the house. He followed behind me quietly. In the hallway he paused. "This feels like too much," he started. But I turned back to him, and before he could finish, I placed my hand gently on his chest. "It doesn't," I said. "It just feels different. And I'm still trying to understand it." He nodded, and that was enough. We didn't sleep in the same bed that night. We didn't need to. The gravity wasn't physical. It was something deeper, a comfort, an emotional resting place we'd found in each other that neither of us had realized we were missing. Over the next week, we talked more about everything. Our shared memories, our missed years, the divorce, my regrets, his fears about stepping out of his father's shadow. Albeit always felt closer to me, but never knew how to say it. There were tears. There was laughter. And there was a closeness that felt sacred, not in a romantic way, but in a way that mattered. A closeness that redefined us, rewrote what family could mean, what healing could look like. And one night, as we sat in the living room, fire crackling in the hearth, I turned to him and said, "I think this is the first time in years I felt like myself again." Lucas didn't smile. He just looked at me, eyes warm, voice steady. "You never stopped being you, Mom. You just finally stopped hiding her." That stayed with me even now. Eventually, his building repairs were finished. He moved back into his own place, but he still came by every week. still brought coffee in the mornings sometimes, still sat beside me on the porch with tea and unspoken thoughts that didn't need names. The story didn't end with a dramatic goodbye or some scandalous moment. It ended quietly with growth, with understanding, with a deeper bond between two people who had carried each other through silence, pain, rediscovery, and come out more whole because of it. And I still think about that night he found me on the floor, wine glass in hand, tears barely held back by years of control. I think about what might have happened if he just walked away or judged me or pretended not to see me crumbling. But he didn't. He stayed. And somehow that changed everything. So maybe we don't always get the life we imagined. Maybe we don't follow the roles or the timelines or the rules we thought were written in stone. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we find something better, something honest, something real. And sometimes it starts with being seen even when you're not at your best.